Today we're going to look at a very different kind of operating system. It's not Windows, it's not Linux, it's Haiku, which is a very easy to use, lean, mean, open source operating system inspired by BOS from back in the 90s. Haiku specifically targets personal computing, and it is also the name of the project that develops and promotes the Haiku operating system. So let's get right into it. You can download Haiku from this download button right here on the haikuos.org website. So it'll take you over here, and like most open source operating systems, there's many different kinds of options for downloading it. You don't have to go to a store and buy it like you do with Windows, or purchase an entire machine like you do with the Mac operating system. You've got direct download options, and you've also got some torrent options, which are personally my favorite way to download these kind of operating systems. It comes in a 32-bit and a 64-bit. So let's go ahead and download the 64-bit option. So while that downloads, let's go take a look at the About section of their webpage. And let's read what is so good about Haiku anyway. So the key highlights that distinguish Haiku from other operating systems include a specific focus on personal computing. So this isn't a server operating system or anything like that. It's just meant for an end user. We've got a custom kernel designed for responsiveness. That's going to be really great. A fully threaded design for great efficiency with a multiprocessor or multi-core CPU. That's also pretty interesting. I might have to test this on hardware later, especially when I'm able to build a new system. I've got some plans underway to build a new desktop. This one that I've got is kind of old. I built it my senior year of high school, so it's going to be time to retire it pretty soon, or maybe give it some other uses instead of it being my daily driver machine. It's got a rich object-oriented API for faster development. It's got a database-like file system using BFS with support for indexed metadata, and it also has a unified, cohesive interface. Now, when you download Haiku, it comes like this. It comes as a zip file, and it also has these SHA files so that you can, of course, verify that your download was intact, that nothing was modified in the transfer of it. And when you unzip this, you get this ISO, which is about 1.1 gigs in size. So it's not too big. It's probably about the size that you would expect from a Linux desktop, maybe a little bit smaller than that. Let's go ahead and start setting it up in VirtualBox. So to set this up in VirtualBox, again, it's going to be a little bit different than setting it up as a Windows install or a Linux install, because obviously this isn't Linux, this isn't Windows. So you're going to want to change the type to other, and you're going to want to change the version to other unknown. Either this one would be a 32-bit or 64-bit if you downloaded a 64-bit ISO like I did. So we're going to go next. Memory size, I'm going to give it about 4 gigs of RAM. Create our virtual hard disk. We'll do it as VDI, fixed size. And we'll give it, why don't we give it 30 gigs? I've got a 1 terabyte SSD. I've got plenty of space to spare to play around with this. So let's go ahead and create it. And then we'll go into our settings, and we'll also go ahead and crank our processor up to 2 cores. And for display, we should also give it some more video memory. Let's give it 128 megs. And the VBox VGA should be fine. I actually found it didn't matter which graphics controller I was using. I couldn't get it to have a 1920 by 1080p resolution. That's what I'm using in my screen, at least natively. There is a way to get around that though, using a VBox manage command after we have our virtual machine set up, which I'm going to show you guys. So for now, we'll just leave that as VBox VGA. Oh, and I almost forgot, of course, we have to put our ISO in place. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, there we go. We got our Haiku. Okay, and then we can start this up. And I won't change it to full screen just yet because, like I said, there's a little bit of a workaround that I got to do in order to get a full screen resolution. So this is our setup screen. You've got the option of just booting straight to the desktop, or you can run the installer. I'm going to go through the installer. It's pretty straightforward. You've got this, which, you know, this is really nice compared to the, well, this isn't really EULA, but if you compare this to the EULAs that you get with Windows or something like that, it's like a damn book that you need 4 or 5 lawyers to explain it to you. But, you know, here they're basically just explaining that this is beta quality software, so there's a risk of losing data, you know, not a great idea to use this in a production environment or any type of environment where you really need things to work because it's a beta. So cool, I'm just using this for a video. We'll go ahead and continue. So you're going to get this message that no partitions have been found. And it doesn't really show up with the partitions, at least when you're doing this in VirtualBox. I'm not sure if it's different in hardware, but that's pretty easy to get around. You just got to click here to set up the partitions, and then you want to choose this one, and then you want to go up to partition, select format, and then choose what type of partition scheme you want to use. I'm going to choose the B file system because, of course, this is based on, or it was inspired by BOS, and this was the same file system that was used there, and it's also the first one that's listed. So pretty much everything is pointing in the direction that this is the one that would be used in most cases. So we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll continue to format the disk. And sure, we'll enable query support, format it, write changes. All right, and then we just have to go back to the setup. And now you see that our VirtualBox hard disk is available. It's no longer that raw file system. It's now the B file system. So then we will begin. And it's done. Look at how fast that sets up. That's got to be the fastest operating system setup that I have ever done. So we'll go ahead and restart. Well, actually, I don't really want to restart just yet because I'm going to show you guys how to fix that full screen thing. Well, actually, let's restart just so that I can show you guys what I was talking about where it doesn't have the full screen option. So if we were to go into, I think it's preferences, screen. Yeah, so you see I don't have 1920 by 1080p. I actually don't have any 16 by 9 aspect ratio resolutions. And like I said, I went through and did all of the different graphics controller settings. There isn't a VirtualBox guest editions for Haiku OS, so that's not the issue. You know, usually when you install that for like a Windows guest or Linux guest, that gets it working, but we can't really do that in this case. But here's a way that we can get around it. I'll actually do this kind of shutdown because, again, this OS is very snappy. You see it shuts down really quick. So to fix that problem, just use this command here. So it's vbox manage, set extra data, and then Haiku is going to be the name of your virtual machine. So whatever you name this, just plug that in there. Custom video mode 1, and then you want to put the aspect ratio that you want to use along with the color depth that you want to use. So then we'll hit enter on that. And now when I start up Haiku, we should see that we have that option. All right, so we'll go back up here. Oh, one other thing that's a little bit weird with Haiku. I don't know if this is, again, just on my system or probably the fact that I'm using VirtualBox. The mouse is like, it's really crazy. Like the DPI setting within this virtual machine is set crazy high. Now, thankfully, I have a DPI switch on my mouse, so it's pretty easy to just lower it to something that would normally be too low for me. Usually I don't use a DPI this low unless I'm trying to draw something very carefully in GIMP, but it's actually normal within this virtual machine. So not too sure what's up about that, but any of you guys that have an easy way to switch the DPI on your mouse, you might want to do the same thing, at least if you're testing this out in a virtual machine. So now we'll go to screen, and you see we've got the 1920 by 1080. Let's go ahead and apply that, and boom, now this looks a whole lot better. Oh, and let's keep it, of course. All right, so now we can start getting into the meat and potatoes of this review. So as you can see, the user interface is pretty retro. This is like something that you would see in maybe Windows ME or even an operating system that came before it. Some people, they might not like a user interface like this, but personally, I don't really care about a whole lot of eye candy that's just on the desktop. Like, I don't really use my operating system. I don't really use my computer to look at the desktop or look at the themes. I use it to get work done most of the time. And so if it's going to slow down my computer like we see with Windows Aero or the Metro theme or anything like that, I don't want it. I'd rather get rid of it to have something basic. We do have a little bit of shadow under the icons though, so it's a little retro, but there's a little bit of fanciness built into it as well. So when you're in Haiku, pretty much everything is done through this application menu here. So you can think of this kind of like your start menu that you would have in Windows, except it's in the exact opposite location. It's not down here, it's here in the top right-hand corner. So you just click on this little feather, and then you've got all these different options, like you've got the About Haiku, which gives you a high-level overview of your system, you know, what kind of processor you've got, how many cores, clock speed, your memory, all of that good stuff. This is sort of like a NeoFetch output. We can see that it's using about 314 megs idling on the system, so nothing else is open, nothing else is running. This is pretty much comparable to like XFCE. I actually think XFCE might be a little bit lighter on my system. That's probably because I'm using Gentoo, so I'm using a much lighter version of XFCE compared to most other Linux desktops. There's not a bunch of extra stuff included with it. It's pretty much just the desktop environment, and obviously this is much heavier than DWM. That's about twice as much when I'm using that window manager. And you might have noticed that when you open up a application window, it doesn't have a bar that goes across the top with like a close and a minimize. I don't even think minimize is a thing in this operating system. You really just have like a maximize, well, not really a true maximize, as we'll see later once I open a window that has it. But like this over here is the close button, the bar, it doesn't go fully across the top. So that's kind of interesting. We can go through our applications to see all of the different stuff that we have. So we have an activity monitor, which actually gives us a more detailed view than the NeoFetch, or the similar to NeoFetch that we had. So this here on the right-hand side is pretty much your maximize. But as you can see, it doesn't fully maximize it. It basically leaves this little application launcher available and just a whole space going down available next to it. So you can see that this really is a fully threaded operating system. So both of the CPUs are being used essentially just because this one application is open. So anything that we open, it's going to utilize all of the CPUs that it can in our system. I don't think there's really any limitation to that, but again, I've only got a 4790K, so I've only got 8 threads maximum. I'm pretty sure that this would be able to utilize all 8 of those threads. If I had something like a Threadripper system, I could see how far it goes. Because like in Windows, for example, I think Windows is only able to use a maximum of like Not sure off the top of my head. Let's just say maybe 32 threads, right? Or maybe 64 threads is what it can use, but it can't do anything beyond that. So it'd be interesting to test this out on a very high thread CPU like a Threadripper to see, can it scale all the way until you get into something like 64, maybe 128 threads. And besides Activity Monitor, there's also a more detailed processor viewer built right into this application menu. So if you click on like these stat icons over here, it'll launch that up. So we can see threads and CPU usage, we can see memory usage, and this gives you a really detailed tree-like view. We go to, oh wait, there we go. Yeah, so it gives you a more detailed view, tree view like you could get with HTOP, if you configure it that way, to have the tree view so you can see like everything running under everything else. And you can also change the priority of all these different applications as well. So you see there's many different options, doing it from idle all the way up to real-time priority. Let's go through our application menu some more. So we've got CodyCam. This would be a webcam application if I had a webcam connected to my computer right now. I don't. So can't really do anything with that, and also couldn't really do anything with it in a virtual machine anyway, since I don't have guest editions. Well, there isn't a guest edition option. You've got BPDF, so this would be a PDF viewer for Haiku. Let's see, what else do we got? We've got Expander, so this is basically an unzip application. We've got disk usage, which of course is going to show you disk usage. Devices will of course show you what devices are connected. We've got a debugger, so this will be used by somebody who's doing development on Haiku. We've got Haiku Depot, so this is essentially like the software center for the Haiku OS. And first thing that we should do is probably update it. Let's see. Yeah, refresh repository. That way it's going to pull all the most up-to-date packages. Now, there's going to be very limited amounts of software available in this OS because it is still in beta. It's in the second beta right now. It has been in development for a while though, about 20 years, but there is a lot of software from Linux that has been ported over. Like you've got, if I search KDE, you've got most of the KDE applications ported over. Well, not most, but you've got quite a bit of them ported over. We've got, let's see, I think KeyPass. Yeah, KeyPass XC is ported over. We've got, I thought Blender was in this. Maybe not. Maybe if I just search like video editor. Huh, maybe not. I thought that Blender was in this. What else was there? I was looking on their website earlier to see a bunch of stuff that it has. Maybe LibreOffice? Okay, there we go. So you've got LibreOffice. That would be a pretty common application that's used on a Linux desktop or even on Windows. I use LibreOffice on my work computer that has Windows 10 running on it because there's just certain things that work better in LibreOffice than in Microsoft Excel. Like one example would be if you've got numbers with leading zeros for inside of a CSV, for whatever reason, Microsoft Excel just craps itself and removes all those leading zeros. But in LibreOffice, when you open up a CSV, it has an option for how to format rows, and then you can format it in such a way that it won't delete those leading zeros, and you can actually see all the data that you need. That actually came in handy this week on a big project that we were working on. My other colleagues didn't know about that, but I guess you could say I was able to save the day with free software. Always great when I can do that. But there are a couple of applications that I use on a daily basis in here. Like you've got Vim inside of it as well. So I could theoretically do some kind of work on here. Like I don't think I could really do video editing. Let's see. Oh, they've got the Nintendo 64 emulator on here. That's interesting. Let's see. I see audio players. I don't really see any video. Oh, well, here we go. A Vitamux. I haven't really used this before, so I'm not sure how great it would be as a video editor. But I guess I could theoretically do some work in here that I use my Linux box for. Recording videos might be a little tough though, because I know OBS isn't ported. Maybe FFmpeg is. Let's see, QPlay 2. Maybe this depends on FFmpeg, so maybe in theory FFmpeg would be available inside of here. So maybe I could do that. Yeah, maybe I could do a little bit inside of here, but there's obviously a lot of applications that are missing, so living inside of Haiku might be a little difficult to do. Let's switch over to the terminal now. So Haiku does use, oh, let's not make that full screen. That's going to be blinding people. So Haiku does have the bash shell inside of it, so pretty much that should be familiar to the Linux folks, and I guess the Mac OS folks as well, at least the small percentage of them that actually use the terminal. And it would be the old school Mac OS folks, since a couple of releases ago they switched to Z shell as the default shell, which is similar but not quite the same. On Haiku, we have a package manager called pkgman. And one thing that I like about this is, like we'll do pkgman install vim. Let's see, I didn't spell it right. Helps to spell things correctly. There we go. So one thing that you might have noticed, and that I kind of like about Haiku, is that you don't have to use sudo to install an application. In fact, there isn't even an admin user in Haiku, or at least it seems that you are automatically defaulted to an admin or a super user, because as you saw, there wasn't any mention of setting up a password during the initial setup. And I could do things in the terminal that a normal user wouldn't be able to do, like install a system install an application as you just saw. I can switch over to the root directory and I can create folders, which is something I normally wouldn't be able to do as a regular user. I can go into Etsy and I can open up stuff and I can modify it and I can right quit it and all of that without actually being a root user. And the whole reason that they do that in Haiku is because it's supposed to be a desktop operating system, right? It's supposed to be used by the end user. It's not a server OS, and it's not like Linux, where Linux is originally more of a server OS that later had spin-offs into desktop OSs. And of course, it's not Windows or the Mac OS that locks everything down because they just assume that, I guess, their users aren't smart enough to have admin powers and they'll just break stuff if you give them too much control. Haiku, it just gives you that control right out of the gate without that super user password barrier. So let's look at some more applications. So we've got a media player, we've got media converters. I wonder what Poor Man is. That's a pretty interesting application name. Let's see, please choose the folder to publish on the web. Oh, okay. This is a web server. Yeah, this is a web server. Okay. I wonder why they chose the name Poor Man for that. It's an interesting name for an application. So let's see how internet works on Haiku. So the default web browser is Web Positive, which is another interesting application name. Let's see if something like YouTube works. Don't really have a whole lot of hope for it. Okay, so our web page did load. I don't know if this is... Oh, okay. Doesn't have any of the video formats. Alright, so it looks like HTML5 isn't going to really work correctly. And there's some weird, like, image rendering that's going on. Like, I don't really know how to describe it. It's like the sharpness is up super high, or it's almost like somebody ran it through a what's that image editor called? Anyway, it's like the sharpness or the contrast is up super high on all these thumbnails. So that doesn't really work too great. That's going to be a limitation. I wonder if there's any other browsers that we could get. All right, let's see. Category, internet. All right, let's see what we got here. So we got Otter Browser. That looks like it's the highest rated one. Is there anything else? No, it doesn't look like it. I guess this would be your option for playing YouTube videos, is basically download them. Oh, actually, I wonder if YouTube DL is on here. All right, YouTube DL. Install. There's no YouTube DL. All right, so that might be kind of a tough thing to do, watch YouTube videos on Haiku. Let's do Otter Browser, just to see how that works. I don't think I've ever used this browser before. And let's take a look at our memory usage while we're installing stuff. Yeah, so you can see these lines are basically right on top of one another. So that's really great that they managed to multi-thread this entire operating system. I bet just about every single application within this OS is multi-threaded. And like I said earlier, I don't really have a lot of threads that I can dedicate to this, but it would be great to see this on a really, like a CPU that really does have a whole lot of threads, a Threadripper or even a Xeon setup where you've got multiple physical CPUs within one single desktop. Let's see, is it still installing? I got an uninstall option, so maybe it's done. Okay, yeah, it's done. So let's open Otter now and see how this works. All right, so can we do the YouTubes in Otter? Seems like this is loading even slower. So this is about the point where I think somebody would lose their patience. Like if the browser wasn't loading their page within this time, they probably wouldn't continue on anymore, trying to see if it's going to actually load, if it's going to work. It's still receiving data from youtube.com. So yeah, I don't think browsing the modern internet, or at least the bloated internet, is really going to be an option on Haiku OS. So we've got some productivity stuff we can do. Oh, and now it's hanging. That's not great. Oh, and now we're getting a little bit of software gore. Oh man, going to YouTube was not a great idea. Let me see if I can figure out how to kill this application. Oh, I can't even access the little application dock here. I might have to restart my VM. Yeah, let's do that. I think the system locked up on us. Switch to a normal DPI. All right, let's go back into it. Well, I think we've had enough of a look at Haiku anyway. So what are my overall thoughts on Haiku OS? I think it's very interesting for what it is. And considering that the development team is so small and they have such little funding that's going into them right now, that they're able to put something like this together. As an end user OS though, I think people, like if people were to actually use this thing, I don't think that they're going to really enjoy it, at least not as a daily driver. They would have to be some very specific use cases. Like if somebody only needs to use LibreOffice and, you know, some of these other applications they have, like, you know, email. Well, there's not, yeah, here it is, email. I don't know why that's down here. This pretty much goes in alphabetical order until we get to email. Oh, that's because it's just called mail. That makes sense. But yeah, unless somebody is just using some of these very specific applications and that they're not really going on the internet, it might work for them. Like I could picture this being an OS maybe in a library where you only want people to be doing work on it and like maybe research for school, so they'd be going to Wikipedia and sites like that. Actually, we should see if Wikipedia actually works, because I think that has, yeah, no, don't do that. Because I think Wikipedia has a little bit of JavaScript on it as well. Okay, yeah, it looks like this is working pretty well. So you could do something like that, but obviously most end users, they pretty much live in the browser. And the fact that there's not a whole lot of browsers even available on Haiku, like you don't have Firefox, you don't have Chromium, so right out of the gate, the browsers that probably 90% plus people are familiar with don't even exist on this OS, and I don't really see them being ported over anytime soon. That's going to really cripple this browser being used by, I guess, normal users, right? Like they would be so much better off just using some type of Linux desktop OS that does have more applications, browsers, and browsers that can also handle the bloated side of the internet. But it does seem quite a bit snappier than Linux desktops that I've tested in VirtualBox so far. I'm definitely going to have to try installing this to hardware and seeing if I can do some kind of benchmarks on it to see how fast it really is. Anyway, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you the next time.